Hello and welcome to the CircuitPython weekly meeting for July 6th, 2020. My name is Scott and I am paid by Adafruit to work full-time on CircuitPython. CircuitPython is an easy to use version of Python designed for microcontrollers, which are tiny computers that are really inexpensive and easy to use. This is our community meeting. We do it every week on the Adafruit Discord server, which you can join by going to the URL adafru.it/discord. That will get you in there, and everybody's welcome to join. The meeting regularly happens at Mondays at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, in the CircuitPython voice channel. And there is a link to we have an iCalendar file that you can use to see if it does get shifted. If Monday is a US holiday, we'll typically shift the meeting along with that. This meeting is in 5 parts. The first part is community news, where we go over a few things happening online with CircuitPython. And that's thanks to Anne, who does the newsletter. We'll talk about that in more detail in a bit. After community news, we do state of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka, which is a statistics view, an objective view of the health of the project, meant to ground us when we're making decisions. The chat is talking about wasps because we were talking about that before the meeting got started. After the stats overview, we have hug reports, and this is the first of 2 round robin sections that we do. Round robin means that we give everybody a chance in the voice chat to say something. If you don't want to speak up, but you have a message to tell people, you can be text only and drop anything you'd like me to read in the hug reports section under your username. We go alphabetical by username, but starting with the person who's hosting. And then for today, that's me. And so I'll start and then we'll loop around. If you don't want to contribute, you're just listening in, just let us know that you're lurking. And I just got that. Way to derail me with the bee emoji. Let us know you're lurking and we'll skip right by you. No problem. Happy to have you here. After that, we have status updates, which is done as a round robin as well. Wait, did I say what hug reports was actually? I don't think so. So hug reports, when we do the round robin, the goal is to take a minute or 2 to thank folks for the cool things and nice things that they've been doing. Basically taking the time to realize the awesome people in our community. Status updates, the next section, is also round robin, but it's a minute or 2 to talk about what you've been working on or what you plan on working on in the coming week. As a way for us to keep track of everything that's happening within the community and give tips and tricks to other folks. After status updates, we have In the Weeds, which is our final section. And this is a free-for-all section, free-form section, I guess, where if you have a topic that you'd like to discuss, it can be a long, deep discussion. That's totally cool. Put your name and the topic in the weeds section in the notes doc, and we'll cover that as we go. So that's the structure of the meeting. I should note that the meeting is recorded, so all of the voice audio coming in is recorded on my end, and the text in the CircuitPython text channel is captured as a screen cap as well. So just be aware of that. It gets posted on YouTube, which is youtube.com/Adafruit. You can find it there, and you can go back to 2017 when we started having these meetings and checking those out. We also do have a notes doc. I've alluded to the notes doc already. It's in the pinned section of the CircuitPython text channel if you want to pull it up, and it also is linked to from the videos and stuff, and the videos are linked from the notes doc as well if you're watching this later. And the notes will include time codes if you want to skip around in the video. Okay, with that, let me take a time code and we'll get going. So For community news, the first thing we have here is CircuitPython on the Seed Studio Wio terminal, which is a cool board from Seed Studio that has a nice case and a screen and stuff. And we now have a board definition for it. I should say that the Wi-Fi and Bluetooth chip is not supported in CircuitPython, so please be aware of that. We have a pull request out for native display support, but that's not in as well. So it's early, but it's super neat. The text here says the Wio terminal, an all-in-one microcontroller development kit, which includes sensors, buttons, Grove connectors, and a screen, is now officially supported in CircuitPython. And that's the board itself, but that's it. And Jeff, I think, posted the links. Thank you, Jeff. Next up, CircuitPython timecode. CircuitPython timecode. Next up, CircuitPython 6.0 Alpha 1 was released last week. Took a little while, which I guess I should talk about later. This is the first alpha release of CircuitPython 6. It is a renumbered version of 5.4 because I2C slave module and class have been renamed to I2C peripheral. So heads up there if you... I don't think many people use I2C slave, but just beware that the name's changed. And it's an alpha because we may actually remove or change a few other things, which we should finish up pretty quick here. So just keep an eye on the release notes. I added a section for things that have changed since 5x. I think most of the things that we're going to remove going forwards are just stuff we warned we would remove in 6. And so I think we just need to go in and actually do that. Otherwise, it's basically 5.4. It's just that we wanted to rename stuff, so we also renumbered it. All right, next up, CircuitPython on a watch. I believe this is Sedacious's watch. Showed CircuitPython running on this prototype, which is awesome. It's based on the Open Hardware Summit 2020 badge, which everyone will get eventually, but I think that they're stuck at somebody's office in NYU that they haven't been able to go into. So we'll get those at some point, and they'll run CircuitPython, and it'll be awesome. Next up, SciPy 2020, the 19th Annual Scientific Computing with Python Conference, is a virtual conference being held July 6th. That's today, I believe. Yep, through the 12th, 2020. The annual SciPy conference brings together over 900 participants from industry, academia, and government to showcase their latest projects, learn from skilled users and developers, and collaborate on code development. The full program will consist of 5 days of tutorials and talks, and 2 days of developer sprints, and there's a link to the event. Thank you, Jeff, for posting it. Next up, we have the Python resource Humble Bundle. Humble Bundle is offering a pay-what-you-want offer for Python learning texts. It's $1,400 worth of materials. A portion of each sale goes to the Python Software Foundation. So get a copy of a lot of neat Python-y things and support the PSF at the same time, which is neat. For our Adafruit update, Adafruit is shipping. We are getting more stuff in stock. So just a friendly reminder that most of CircuitPython's development, at least all the folks paid in this meeting, are paid by Adafruit. And so shopping with Adafruit directly supports CircuitPython, even if the board itself is not on it. So, or remember, we support boards that are not Adafruit boards as well. So please purchase stuff from Adafruit. Last up, as always, a huge thank you to Anne for putting the newsletter together. The newsletter is a email newsletter that goes out every Tuesday morning with all the different things surrounding Python and CircuitPython and MicroPython that Anne and others find on the internet. So if you find stuff for CircuitPython and or doing cool projects that you'd love to see featured in an email that goes out to a few thousand folks, the draft is always done publicly on GitHub under the CircuitPython weekly newsletter repo, and there's a link in the notes there if you have stuff you want to contribute. Feel free to contribute every week. We're always looking for cool stuff. All right, that is community news. Now we're going to move on to the state of CircuitPython libraries in Blinka. As I said earlier, this is kind of a statistics objective view of the health of the project. Primarily what we're looking for is like interactions and the number of people interacting with CircuitPython in all the different areas. So first, let's talk numbers overall. Overall, we had 21 pull requests merged from 15 different authors, which is awesome. Some new folks that I don't recognize in this list are RE Vertigo, which maybe Katney saw last week, Fig 1010, Unid, and W. Tamura are all new folks, so thank you to them. We had 10 reviewers, which is awesome, and that number is growing, so thank you, everyone. As we point out every week, the number of reviewers is really what allows us to scale in the number of authors. So we're always looking for people to level up and help us review. So thank you to everybody there for being a reviewer. Issues-wise, we had 25 closed issues by 9 people, 17 opens by 16 people. So a lot of people involved, or more people involved, and we're net down 8 issues, which is great. And overall, I would say that we're starting to pick up on libraries again because we're starting to produce more new sensors, which is great. On the Blinka side, we continue to see display IO mature, which is awesome. And on the core CircuitPython side, obviously, we've made the switch to 6.0. We've concluded the discussions about deprecating master and slave terminology, which is awesome. And I think we ended up on really good names. So thank you to everybody who contributed to that. And I think we're not too far from a stable 6.0 release. Jeff is kind of the person on the hook for that, making things a bit quicker, which is going to be awesome. So no pressure, Jeff. And with that, let me talk about the core specifically, and then I'll hand it off to Katney and Melissa for the other 2 portions. For the core, we had 5 pull requests merged from 7 different authors. Unid, W. Tamuro, and Arya Vertigo are new authors that I recognize there. And the way this happens actually is that commits can be attributed to 2 people, like the person that brought it in and the original author. So that's how you get more authors than pull requests. And then on the reviewer side, we had 3 reviewers. So thank you to those folks. And Jeff points out that a lot of the new authors are contributing translations through Weblate. So Jeff, thanks for setting that up. And thank you to all the new folks coming in and helping bring CircuitPython to your own language. All right, we have 15 open pull requests where the oldest has been open 79 days. It doesn't look too bad, and most of them are new, so thank you to everybody there. Issues-wise, we had 3 closed issues by 3 people and 6 opened by 6 people, so we're net positive, which ideally we would not be, but we are kind of like tending to grow. We have 319 total open issues, so if you want to start contributing, please take a look at those. A lot of those, actually 252 of those are marked long-term, which are ones that are not a high priority for us. We still have 5x features and bug fixes as well, which would be good to get shuffled around and reprioritized now that we're focused on 6.0. And we also have 5 issues not assigned to milestones. So if you want to help with that, we do actually have a way to give just kind of like triage permissions on the repo. So if you're interested in helping go through issues and organizing them, that would be awesome, because I'm certainly not good enough about going through it. And with that, let's kick it over to Katney for the libraries.
Thanks, Scott. So this is all of the CircuitPython libraries information combined into one. And so across all the libraries, we had 14 pull requests merged. The oldest was a week old, and a bunch of them were less than a day, which is excellent, by 8 authors and amazingly 9 reviewers. So that's great that we're seeing now more reviewers than authors even, which is excellent because, like you said, the more reviewers we have, the more authors we can support. So I'm perfectly happy to see those numbers swapped. Leaving us with 36 open pull requests. We had 21 issues closed by 6 people and 11 open by 11 people, leaving us with 166 open issues. all of this information is available on circuitpython.org/contributing. So if you're looking to get started contributing and you don't know where to start, that's an excellent place to go. It has all the open PRs, all the open issues, and a list of library infrastructure issues as well. And a list of in the issues, you can sort them by label. And so you could sort for good first issue if you're just getting started, or bug or enhancement if you are looking for something more complicated to do. Find something that interests you and take a look at it. We have a guide on getting started with Git and GitHub, as well as the fact that we're always available to help with getting started with that sort of thing. So don't let any of that stop you. In terms of library updates in the last 7 days, we had one new library, the BH1750, and a number of updated libraries that I will not read through. And that's where we are with the libraries.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Katney. All right, next up we have Blinka updates from Maker Melissa.
Hello, so Blinka is our CircuitPython compatibility layer for Raspberry Pi and other single board computers. And this week we had 2 pull requests merged by 2 authors and 2 reviewers. There is 1 open pull request. I believe that's because it was failing the checks. And there was 1 closed issue by 1 person and 0 open by 0 people, leaving a net of 24 open issues. There have been 2,656 PyPI downloads in the last week. We are currently supporting 52 boards.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa. All right, next up we have the Hug Reports section of this. Just a quick thing. I think everybody knows the drill here. The idea is that we go in a circle or loop around and give everybody a chance to speak. Let us know if you're text only or lurking so that I don't wait for you to speak up. Anyway, so I will start and then we'll go to TG Techie. So for myself, thanks to Obra from Keyboardio for the WeChat advice and also helping me get on WeChat. Thanks to Elaine from Seed for helping me get the group chat going. I was like, I don't know how to use this. So she helped me out with that, which is awesome. Anson, he 97 from Seed as well, has been working on the Wio terminal support. So hug report to them. Hug report to Jerry, David, G, Foamy Guy, Dan H, and Anecdata for helping folks on Discord. It's always awesome to see folks come here and get the information they need, which is great. And lastly, a huge hug report to Dave Putz, again, Dave P in the voice chat, again, for diving deep into the real-time clock on the SAMD21 that looks to be the root cause for why Pulse-In's really been having a lot of problems. So really cool stuff. Thanks, Dave, for digging into that. And I saw that there's a PR, so I'm excited to take a look. And with that, let's go to TG Techie.
As always, a hug to the community for being so opening and welcoming. A hug to Tanu for your live streams that are very educational. And a hug to everyone who's been working on 6.0.
All right. Thank you, TG Techie. All right, I think Anecdata is lurking. Yeah, these margins are throwing me off. The note stock had margins changed. Anecdata says, group hug and a hug report to Jerry N for being a good sounding board as we were each working on testing the ESP32S2. Whoa. Now the margins are better and now everything's shuffled again. Good. Okay. Ann B is lurking, so we'll go to Brent.
Just a group hug this week.
All right. Thanks, Brent. All right, next we have C. Grover, who's also text only, and says hug to the community and team. And with that, we'll go to Charles.
I have a hug. I have a hug report for you, Tanu. I really have been enjoying those deep dives because I get to see really what goes into creating getting a new board to function.
Yeah, thank you.
And also a group hug to everybody else for 6.0. I'm going to try it on a couple of my board, Grand Central, and a couple of circuit playground expresses. Thank you.
Thanks, Charles. All right, next up we have Dan.
This week, just a group hug in an expanded way that I really appreciate the whole community that is, as I said, an active participant in our software development. That really is helpful. People are constantly testing and trying things and reporting things and contributing fixes. It's really makes my life a lot easier and more productive and more fun in many ways. Okay.
Thanks, Dan. All right, Dave is lurking, and now we have notes from David Glad. David says, hug report to Foamy Guy for triggering the conversation on compiling CircuitPython on the Pi. Hug report to Jerry N for providing the toolchain, and Dan H for the Learn Guide. And next up, we have Fede2, who is also text only, so I will read off. It says, hug report to Tanute for starting to revise the Wi-Fi related libraries. It's long overdue. To Ann B and Katney for being super helpful on the translation guides. And to the Weblate project and for Adafruit for paying the hosting. I hope to get Spanish at 100% before the 6.0 release. Awesome, that would be great. And next up we have Foamy Guy.
Right. This week I would like to give a hug report to KJW for finding an issue with display text, as well as to KMatch98 for helping fix that issue. To Anecdata, helped me with some color conversion bitwise math. Bitwise is one of the things I've never been so great at, so I definitely really appreciated that over the weekend. Discord user PitchBright, I don't know if they came to this meeting or not. I think they might be new to the community, but for patiently working through some troubleshooting with NeoPixels. I know that's never fun when you want to make some blinking lights and it's not working. So I appreciate them going through that, and we actually found the root cause of an issue there, so that was good. To Maker Melissa for all the work on Blinka, and especially Display I/O for Blinka. I've been playing with that a lot lately and really enjoying what I'm seeing there. And then lastly, to Chris Young on the show and tell last week. Chris Young showed a example of wireless gaming using LoRa, like LoRa Featherwings. Running on Pygamers, and I really thought that was a super cool idea and a really neat way to utilize those LoRa Featherwings. So I am that inspired me to start the process of trying to bring that same thing over to CircuitPython. That's all I got for this week.
Thanks, Foamy Guy. All right, next up we have Higher Effect. It doesn't look like your mic's working. Anyone else hear him?
I don't.
All right. I'll just read it off. Yeah. Higher Effect says group hug to everybody. Next up, we have text from Jason. Jason says, hug report to Adafruit for the Ion MPI section last week featuring the Evo M51. Thank you. And next up we have Jeff.
Hello. I want to start off with the group hug and also thank Adafruit for being accommodating when I asked for time off at the last minute. Kind of realized that I'd been going nonstop since December or something. Well, no, I had a vacation in February, but had been going for a while without a break, and so I took a couple days off last week. I want to thank Scott for getting the 6.0 alpha out, and as he points out, I'm on the hook for the major unfinished, barely started part. Thanks to our new translation contributors, Unid, who's been working on the Indonesian translation, and Rai Vertigo on the Dutch translation. And I want to thank everybody who's participating in discussions on issues and pull requests. We don't specifically count you up, but all that information you provide is valuable in moving our understanding of problems and their fixes forward. So it's a great way to help in the community when you can fill in that information that we need to go ahead and get something resolved or get a pull request merged. Yeah, so that's what I got.
Thanks, Jeff. All right, next up is Jerry.
Hi, everyone. Let's see. Thanks to Scott for the bus.io support on ESP32. Nice to have I2C and SPI. And Anecdata for your help this week also for trying to get things going. And Dave P. for the quick fix to the Pulse IN for the SAMD21. That's nice to have that back online. And everybody who worked hard to quickly get the terminology changes in to remove the use of the terms master and slave. Actions do speak loudly. So thank you. And group hug to everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, Jerry. Next up is Katney.
All right, so I have a hug report to Foamy Guy for providing so many PR reviews with thorough testing and comments and suggestions when needed. To Fede2 for translating my Key of Lime guide into Spanish, although the pun was apparently lost in translation. To Jeff for working towards running this meeting. To the team and community who were involved in CircuitPython 6.0. To everyone who's been consistently helping out on Discord. Too many people to name, but it's great to see when questions are being asked, they're quickly being answered. Especially when they're complicated and or end up requiring lengthy testing and that sort of thing. Thank you for sticking with it. And to community moderators on Discord for continuing to keep our community welcoming and positive and providing ideas and suggestions to improve the community experience.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney. All right, next up we have notes from Kinger North. Kinger North says, a big hug to Ann B for including me in the Python on Microcontrollers weekly newsletter, and a group hug for all of the community for continuing work in Discord and CircuitPython. All right, next up we have Maker Melissa.
Hello. I wanted to start out by giving a hug report to Foamy Guy, KMash98, and KGW for taking care of fixing up and testing the display text library. Hug to Foamy Guy for testing and reviewing some of my PRs. To you, Scott, and Dan for taking care of CircuitPython.org, and a group hug.
All right. Mark and Mr. Certainly are lurking, so we'll go to Stargirl.
Hello, man.
Hi. So I'm going to give
What's up?
Hold on. Zeus, we're in the middle of a meeting. We can get to you later.
Oh,
go ahead,
okay.
Stargirl.
No worries. Cool. So first a hug to Sean Himmel for his excellent blog post on how to do PWM on the SAMD21 using just registers. That's a lot of fun for varying definitions of fun. And everyone who worked on CircuitPython 6.0, it's looking great.
Awesome. Thanks, Stargirl. All right, Zeus, we're doing hug reports where we thank folks in the CircuitPython community for the work that they've been doing. Do you have anything to add? No. All right, we're going to do a round robin up here next as well, and just let us know if you want to listen in, and we'll skip over you. Okay, next up we have status updates, which is a chance for each of us to spend a minute or two to talk about what we've been working on and what we plan on working on in the coming week. I will start, and then we'll go through the list. Let us know if you're lurking, and if you just want to be text only, let us know, and I'll read it off for you. And also note that this meeting is recorded and published on YouTube at youtube.com/Adafruit. Okay, and I will start. First, wait, time code. Always time code. ESP32 S2 bus IOs merged in and released in 6.0 Alpha 1. I'm currently in the middle of reworking Adafruit requests and ESP32 SPI for smaller APIs and less memory use. I created a WeChat account to better communicate with Chinese CircuitPython folks. So if you know somebody who is in China and wants to be able to ask questions with a little bit more speed than email or GitHub issues, I'm happy to add folks on WeChat. So thanks to the Seed folks for helping with that as well. And one to-do list besides email, or to-do item besides email and reviews, is to add a 6x library and bundle builds so that people can match things up as well for that. And I feel like there's something I'm forgetting, but I can't remember what it is. So let's go to TG Techie.
So, what I've been working on has been for a job. I have an internship at a military R&D place. And while we've mostly been using Rust, I was able to sneak some CircuitPython in and convince people that we should try it a little bit. So I was able to write a quick driver to interface with a chip that allows communication over a military standard protocol. And it was super easy in Python. It took only an hour or two to get up and running.
Nice.
So thank you, everyone.
Glad it's working. All right. Next up, we have. Let me scroll up here. Anecdata and Anne are lurking, so let's go to Brent.
Hi. Last week I moved. I'm enjoying being able to walk around again and take bike rides. And this week I'm working on looking at existing and maybe doing a new implementation for handling protocol buffers on CircuitPython. I want to be able to compile the interface design language, which is basically like the structure of the data that you're about to serialize, and then the type of data that you are serializing, and into Python code, which then you can drag and drop onto CircuitPy. And then there will be a parser as well for that.
Matt,
And I want to see what's available.
Matt,
Sorry. I don't know if this person can actually hear me or isn't even paying attention. Zeus, can you hear me? No. All right. Now their server muted. All right. Let's keep going. All right, Charles, you're next.
Okay. Well, basically, the big thing for me this week is going to be updating my Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry Pi for CircuitPython and all my other dozen and a half CircuitPython boards to 6.0, so I can try it out and see if there's anything funny going on with my existing projects.
Mm-hmm. That's super helpful. Thanks, Charles. All right, next up we have Dan.
Okay, my main work has been continuing to work on re-implementing BLEIO, this time for HCI adapters like, in this case, the ESP32, which can talk the HCI protocol, which is a way of doing Bluetooth using a serial command interface. So I started with some code from the Arduino BLE library, which was kind of minimal, and I had to switch how it communicates with the UART over UART, but also it didn't have a set of header files that defined all the HCI commands. It just included some things that it needed. So after poking around and trying a few alternatives, I found that the Zephyr HCI header files are Apache as opposed to LGPL, which is helpful. And I've been rewriting the code I took from Arduino BLE to use those. Basically, I'm pretty much changing every line in the original file. So, but that's almost done. And then I'll go back to testing and then writing again. And the other thing that I have to change is is that another thing that happened is that we've been having issues with Linux crashing when you do certain things on USB with a CircuitPython board. Sometimes it's if you reformat the file system, sometimes if you just reset, or sometimes even maybe if you unplug. And so after thinking that I figured that this was a USB driver problem, I was directed to bring this up in the USB, the Linux USB maintainers mailing list. So I did, and then I got 2 answers basically saying like, this is not our problem, and if you do things that are bad, like if you accidentally format the file system underneath the things, we reserve the right to crash. So I was just like, okay, they're not going to. They think there's nothing to fix. I will be asking in the weeds for a couple more examples if people have any, to see if I can come up with some examples where it really is only the USB driver. But I think that I'm not going to get anywhere with getting this fixed, unfortunately. I can ameliorate it in various ways. Like it turns out if we storage.erase file system can disconnect from USB, and that seems to help. And maybe we can do something like that, or introduce delays in a few places that might help. All right, that's it.
Thanks for digging into that, Dan.
Yeah, it's disappointing.
Yeah, sometimes that's how it goes. All right, Dave P and Fetty2 are lurking, so let's go to Foamy Guy.
Right. For this past week, I worked on implementing the fill row method for the display object in Blinka Display.io, as well as making a few tweaks to the bitmap saver library, which I had actually forgotten about until more recently. And I got that with those tweaks and the fill row method, I was able to get the bitmap saving working on Blinka Display.io. And just real quick, I forgot to mention in my hug report section to a hug for Jeff for pointing me in the right direction of that fill row method. So definitely appreciate that. One of the other things I was doing was troubleshooting the issues with the label inside the display text library. So that there's actually two sort of threads going on simultaneously. One of them was an issue related to a change that I had made with the anchored position and having scaled texts. I had made a fix that allowed that to work with scaled texts, but there was an issue when you went to get the anchored position back out of it. That was not properly applying the scale. And then the other thing that came along was changing it to not use 0 size bitmaps. So those two kind of got rolled into one. But that was one of the things I worked on. And then the JSON layout utility, I think I've mentioned that a few times now. I got that working again on Blinka Display.io this week, and I was able to set up a test that will run through all of my example layouts and save a screenshot of each one of them. That way I can look back after the fact and see at a glance what everything is looking like, and if I have made any major problems show up with recent changes. And then the last one that I worked on this week was I started making a clone of a old QBasic game called Gorillas. It's like you have a couple buildings, like a skyline. You get 2 gorillas on either side, and they throw bananas back and forth at each other. So that's been really fun. And then next week, I need to finish up. I'll probably be working on that later on tonight. Finish up the display text fix NPR. I want to get the Gorillas game working and maybe start in on the LoRa radio portion of that. And then lastly, I do want to get back to, or actually I got 2 more. One of them is get back to the PyBadger library. I want to add support for the Halloween M4 and maybe the TFT Gizmo. And then the last one for me this week will be working on cleaning up a PR that was a really nice example somebody submitted of storing sensor data in MySQL databases on Raspberry Pi.
Awesome. Thanks, Foamy Guy. All right. Next, we have Higher Effect. Oh, yeah, and his mic is still not working. I can see you muting and unmuting, but that's... I'll read it off. Okay, Higher Effect has in the notes for last week, rewriting Pulse.io to use the new timers. Debug a HAL issue with the SPI that was causing issues during beginner tutorials, reading about the ESP32S2, and but failed to get on WeChat. If anybody knows somebody that would be handy. And if you don't let me just expand on that. When you join WeChat, they ask you to verify that you're a real person by having somebody else either like scan a barcode from your phone or adding your phone number. So, and that person that adds you has to have been on WeChat for a while. So I'll ask the person that vouched for me if they can vouch for you too. So yeah, DM me your phone number, Lucian, and I'll ask Jesse to do it. Okay. This week, Lucian is finishing the timer PR. I'm gonna poke at Rotary IO and get control going with the ESP32S2, and also moving to a new apartment. All right. Next up, we have Jason P, who's lurking, so I'll read it off. Jason says, board live development for the Evo M51, and creating an example for Evo Box, which is an Evo M51 plus an airlift featherwing plus Adafruit IO, which sounds super neat. And next up, we have Jeff.
Hello again. As I mentioned earlier, I took a break for much of last week. I did do a couple of things, though, such as reviewing the ESP32S2 bus IO PR. This week, I am going to be working on the background tasks, starting with SAMD. As Scott points out, this is one of the major things that is needed for 6.0 so that we don't have a performance regression. I had some early success with audio today, but it's not reliable. And I really am feeling like I need to understand better the relationship between the DMA, the event system, and the interrupt controller. So if anybody has resources about that for the SAMD51, SAMD54, SAMD21 family, please drop some links in chat. I could still use even just a good tutorial introduction because, you know, the data sheet and register information is great, but if you don't have that overall grasp of how it's supposed to fit together, I don't know. I'm just it's not clicking yet.
Maybe we should just talk about that in the weeds, because I've done a lot of that.
Sure. I was hoping for something to read because I'm not sure I have the right questions to ask yet, but we can talk about it down in the weeds. I'll drop it at the end, and if we've got strength left, we can get into it. For fun stuff, I bought an older HP frequency counter on eBay this weekend. It should fill a gap in my test equipment lineup. And I realized I owe a belated hug request to Higher Effect for reviewing a pull request about pin allocation on the STM port. It was just a simplification of the code, but I thought it was valuable, and I guess he did as well. So thanks for that.
Awesome. All right. Thanks, Jeff. Next up is Jerry.
Oh, let's see. So I did some playing around with the ESP32 new stuff. Tried a bunch of I2C sensors and didn't run any problems with any of those. With SPI, things were a little less clear. Some work fine, like the BME 280, no problem. And then again, in working with back and forth with that anecdote a little bit, finally got the ESP32 SPI on an airlift. Working as well as it can. There's actually, you know, some of the background support isn't complete. There's no UJSON, but that doesn't matter. But I ran into a funny little issue on it that I kind of gave up on, but I'm not sure if it's where it could be. Just throw it out there for anyone who runs into something similar. Because the ESP32 is big, it won't fit on a standard. There's no room on it if you plug it into a standard breadboard.
Right.
So I spanned 2 breadboards and that worked nicely to get me some space. But I found that when I was trying to hook up a breakout board to it, an airlift breakout, if I didn't go to the pins right next to the power and ground pins with my jumpers to the breakout, it would communicate for some things. But then when and I'm suspicious, you know, talking with I think it was Matt Bodger on the Discord, that when it was transmitting Wi-Fi, it would fail. It would time out. And it was really, really strange. If I put it on the pins nearest to power and ground, it worked fine. if I tried to put power and ground over to the rail side of the rail pins on the breadboard, then it wouldn't work. So something picking up noise, it looks like, but it's really kind of a bizarre problem. And I don't know if it's SPI related, noise related, or where to look for it, but I finally gave up for now. But using a feather wing on your adapter board worked fine. No problems with that at all. And so, and then the other SPI device I tried was an SD card. And there it just keeps saying it can't detect the card. So I'm not sure what's going on there. Tried that a couple of different times. So something's not right, but that may not be surprising. There's a lot of stuff going on on the SD card side. So I'll try and look at that as time allows. And then I got a little bit back on this since PulseIN is now fixed, thanks to the work by Dave P. I was trying to get back to this thing of squeezing the RFM9X build into the CircuitPython build. And I can get it in there if I throw out some core modules like RTC, HID, touch. Right now I took NeoPixel out to make a little more room because I can only build for English right now if I don't take out NeoPixel. So I'm still trying to decide the best way to go about this. I was hoping I could take PulseIO out and use BitBang, but that doesn't seem to be working. I'm not quite sure why. That might be worth a little more effort. The whole reason for trying to keep PulseIO in there is because the DHT sensors are so popular and they don't work without it. So I don't see a reason why BitBang shouldn't work, but it's not. And yeah, so then the biggest problem I have is I get it working, but then it fails for some of the translations. So I'm still squeezing.
What bitbang are you using for the DHT? Like I2C or?
No, it's neither. It's just sort of.
Are you just bitbanging it yourself?
Yeah. So in the if you look in the DHT library, it automatically, if PulseIO is not there, it automatically switches over to a bitbang method,
right?
Which works on the Raspberry Pi,
right?
But it doesn't seem to work on the M0, or at least not on the RFM9X board. So, and it probably should, I think. So it might be worth spending a little time on.
I think it's probably a speed issue.
Yeah.
Like, because the problem is that you're not clocking the data coming in from the DHT. So, like, it's gonna go one speed and you can't slow it down.
Right. If you miss anything, okay. So maybe it isn't possible. Or I don't know if there's something that could be done to streamline it to make it work, but
yeah, I mean that's what Pulsin's for.
Right, exactly. And so then it's just a trade-off. Does PulseIO require analog?
No.
Okay, so the other option is I could take analog IO out, which might be a better choice. Again, something's got to go.
Yeah, it's gonna be tight.
Yeah. So I'll keep poking at it. And again, nobody's clamoring for this right now anyway. So it's more of an exercise in learning. So
yeah, and it's a good exercise because last time we talked, there was a couple potential leads on like ways that libraries were taking more memory than I thought. So
right,
you could discover something that applies across the whole suite of libraries, which would be awesome.
All right, keep poking.
Cool. Thanks, Jerry. All right. Next up, we have Katney.
Hello. So last week, I published the 74HC595 guide. That's a I/O expander chip and shift register. And the guide shows how to wire it up and use it to control 8 LEDs, which is actually a nightmare. So that's why we needed a guide. So that's done. I created a Fritzing object for the BH1750, which I did not remember at the time that I wrote the notes, so I put XX in there, but I just fixed it. Also updated the TPS61023 Fritzing and uploaded the PCB files to GitHub. There's no guide for that. It doesn't need one, but the information is available on the product page. So if you need any of that, that's where to look for those. I finished updating the ST combo board guide. When the guide was created, there was a second feather wing that wasn't in the shop, but that went into the shop and now it's added. also corrected an issue with my Key of Lime guide. There's nothing like someone translating your guides to find bugs. So that's actually been really excellent though, because this is stuff that nobody's noticed. That was the first guide I wrote, so 2017, and nobody noticed the issue until now, which is both good and bad. But it also means that bugs in guides are being found while the translations are happening. So that's been excellent. And then I did some PRs, etc., miscellaneous, whatnot. So this week, my priority is to finish writing up a document I started that is a guide to running the CircuitPython weekly meeting. Jeff has offered to run the meeting, but I have not completed the document. So that is a priority for me to go through and get that written up. It's got a lot of content already, but there's quite a bit that still needs to go in there, and I want to be able to enable others to run the meeting, because we would love to have plenty more people running this meeting. Right now it's just Scott and I, which has been doable because typically both of us are not gone, but there's going to be a time when both of us are gone, so it's good to not have a point of failure. So the more people we can involve with this, the better. I need to blog up the guide release. I'm going to be working up a welcome blurb for the Adafruit Discord server and set up a welcome screen that shows up when you join. We are having a lot of people join us that are finding us through what's called server discovery, which is not people knowing about Adafruit and then finding the Discord server. It's people punching in DIY or coding or education and finding the Adafruit server and joining and not having any idea what Adafruit is. So we want to have something to point them to, and also something that sort of guides people to good places to start on the server, which is what that welcome screen will be. So we're going to get that set up. I need to update the BMP 280 guide. We now have a STEMMA QT version of the chip. So that will be going in there with new wiring diagrams and that sort of thing so that you know how to use both. I will be updating a CircuitPython servo guide to include Raspberry Pi because, and I may be scooping, but Melissa added PWM to Blinka. So now servos and so on can be used on Raspberry Pi as well, using Blinka and CircuitPython. The plan for moving the CircuitPython libraries from master branch to main branch is that we're going to do it slowly. Or not so much slowly, but incrementally. So hopefully the first one will get moved this week, and then I will be updating the contributing to Git and GitHub guide to reference main and also explain how to change your branch locally so that you're pushing to main and so on and so forth, which will also be good for people contributing to CircuitPython because we've already made the switch. So the plan is this week I want to get that guide updated so we can start to make that change. I would like to see that made sooner rather than later, but it has been requested that it be done incrementally. So I want to get that started. There's some prerequisites needed to get our PyPI download stats going again that I need to do, which is making accounts and that sort of thing, so we can get that going. I want to try and do that this week. And then I have some stuff that's been assigned to me on GitHub, some issues that I need to fix up, but I haven't actually gone through them. I just know that they're there. I saw the emails go by. So I need to check my assigned GitHub issues. And that's what I'll be doing this week.
Awesome. Thank you, Katney. All right. Next, we have text from Kinger North, who says, last week worked on another episode of my YouTube live stream of microcontrollers with Kinger North and commissioned a production line PLC for a local packaging company. This week, working on the next live stream content and working on a new water handling program PLC for the same local packaging company. Awesome. And Kinger North, you should link to your YouTube live stream. That would be awesome. Next up, we have Maker Melissa.
Hello. Last week, I made some fixes to the Blinka Display I/O library that sped it up significantly. I ported several examples to the Blinka PyPortal library and made several improvements and fixes along the way. I started a guide on using Blinka PyPortal and Blinka Display.io. I implemented PWM out in Blinka, so now we have pulse width modulation. And the reason I did that is so I could add the full brightness and backlight control to Blinka Display.io. This week, I'm going to finish up that guide. I am going to take a closer look at why some an e-ink example is failing on the M0 running in Arduino, and hopefully I'll add some more features to Blinka Display.io. And that's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Melissa. Okay, Mark and Mr. Certainly are lurking, so let's go to Stargirl.
Hi, folks.
Hello.
I wrote up a blog post about how to get phase-shifted PWM outputs from the SAMD21. It's pretty interesting if you want to know how the internals of the SAMD21 work, because there's quite a few things involved in making that happen, but it's pretty neat. Relatedly, I started work on a new Eurorack module that unfortunately won't run CircuitPython, but it'll use the SAMD21. So I will be using lots of information and code that I learned from CircuitPython to make that work. Still sorting out move stuff, but I finally have a move date, and I'll be moving from Seattle to Atlanta on August 5th. So that'll be fun.
Just
and that's
under
it.
a month. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you, Stargirl. All right, and that is it for status updates. Lastly, we have the In the Weeds section, which is, oh, that's not the right time. When we get a chance to just talk about any other discussion points that we want to have more in depth, that's why we put them at the end. And first up, we have a topic from Dan.
So I've discussed this with a few people in text, but I just want to follow up on things. I'd like to know if you use CircuitPython on boards on Linux, could be Intel architecture Linux, or it could be Raspberry Pi or something else. And if you have seen plugging in or unplugging or resetting or doing something on your Linux board that causes the host computer to crash. So Jerry, I have seen it when I reset the file system and sometimes just when I plug in. Jerry, you said that you've seen it when the board is plugged in for a while and then you just unplug the board. Is that correct?
That's correct. Only on Linux. It hasn't happened on Raspberry Pi.
And was it after a time when you might have been changing the file system, like you wrote a file and then you unplugged it very soon after that?
Yeah, I've done. There have also been times that I've just tried plugging a board in and just plugging and unplugging it a few times, and it will kill it without.
But I'm really interested in the unplug.
Right. No, I mean.
Yeah.
I don't, and I thought it required starting the REPL or something like that, but I don't believe so. I mean, just plugging it in, waiting a while, and unplugging it. It always fails on unplug, but I don't necessarily have to do anything to the board to trigger it.
So you unplug and then you leave it unplugged and then it crashes. Okay, that's what.
It's immediate. It's instantaneous when you unplug. Basically, normally you hear a little sound from the computer when it you don't hear that, and the screen is frozen. The computer is totally frozen. I have to power cycle it.
Right. So this might be based on the small dialogue that I had on the Linux USB mailing list. It might be due to the file system and the USB driver code saying, oh no, the device has gone away. Now they're supposed to tolerate that because people can unplug their flash drives.
Right.
It might be something because it's FAT12 or something. So I will try to replicate.
What is it? For a while when I first started noticing it, and it's funny. It certainly is happening a lot. I've been doing this for years, unplugging boards from there.
Right.
Dan?
Yeah.
But
it just occurred to me, maybe it's not in the USB system, where the other place that you might want to think about is there is a separate hot plug subsystem in Linux, and if that's you might be getting a failure there too.
Right. Well, I just want to try to find the reproduced cases. So Jerry, could you finish? Sorry, you
Yeah,
were.
one of the things I was going to suggest is that it started when I started playing with the Saola feather adapters, when I started noticing it quite regularly. So I thought, oh, maybe it's got something to do with the SP32 or that. But it's happened to me also with an M0 board the other day. So it's certainly not limited to that. I
And
wondered
it's always
in
on
that
your
case,
Mac Mini that's running Linux, old Mac Mini that's running
right,
Linux.
it's an old Mac Mini running Linux.
Right.
But I wondered if it's possible, and I haven't been brave enough to try this yet, if it had anything to do with just, with a power, with shorting pins if you're not plugging the thing, pulling the thing out straight. And I thought about just hooking up a USB breakout and trying shorting pins and seeing if that would
Yeah, I
kill it.
don't think that would be the issue, but
That's
thank you.
right.
Has anybody else noticed this problem? That's what I want to know.
I've had it.
The chat.
Dan, I've
Yeah.
had it with between my Raspberry Pi and my Circuit Playground.
And is it when you plug it in or unplug it?
When I unplug it.
You unplug it and then it crashes.
Without first disconnect, without first
unmounting
it.
Great, thank you. That's another. You're right. This makes me.
That's why I'm sort of suspicious. That's why I'm sort of suspicious of the USB hot plug, the hot plug system also, besides the USB.
Right. Well, the person who was on the mailing list said that they've tried to prevent that problem, but since they probably don't have many FAT12 drives, that's what I'm going to test this. All right, thank you. Anybody else? Otherwise, we can move on.
I have something else that I wrote down, but I don't have it immediately. I'll get in contact with you through Discord later on.
All right. I'm all done now.
All right. Next up, we have Jerry.
Yeah, and I apologize for bringing this up again, but I can't remember what the resolution was. Mm-hmm. We have a 4.x, a 5.x, and soon to be a 6.x bundle release. Mm-hmm. And if I'm not mistaken, they are actually identical. So I can't remember why we do this.
They're not always identical.
Are they? Are there actually any differences?
Well, not in these current ones, but if we pull in new MicroPython and the version changes, then they won't be the same.
If the only thing that'll change will be if the MPY format changes, right?
Correct.
Yeah, and that hasn't happened since 2.x. So I'm just wondering, should we just tie it, only build new dual versions when we're supporting two versions of MPY format, rather than every time we do a new release? That's all.
I didn't want to have to convey another versioning scheme to people.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't want to name it like the 4x-5x bundle or something like that.
I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of churning going on. I see on Discord people saying, "Oh, I got to update all my libraries because I'm going from 5.3 from 5 to 6 or 4 to 5," and that really is irrelevant.
Except typically, people need to update their libraries in general. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. I understand where you're coming from with it, but we want people to be running the latest libraries regardless. And like Scott was saying, trying to convey another versioning scheme is not the greatest.
Well, what
I think that's I guess I think it would be simpler to get people to run the latest libraries by only having one. And like I said, if and when we update MicroPython, I guess looking at the notes from the latest MicroPython, there probably will be a format change coming in the next. So, but again, and that's going to be a big breaking issue for people.
Yeah.
So, but and is that going to be 7 when we do that?
That's my assumption. Yes.
Yeah, or it'll be a major release change. So it makes sense maybe to do a pre-7 and a 7. It just seems like having, I don't know, an awful lot of. I guess I see on Discord often people say, "Oh, you know, it must be broken because I'm using the 4.x library rather than the 5.x library," and they spend a bunch of time updating it or changing it, and that there's seems to be
Well,
unnecessary.
question for me is what happens when you you fix and you fix a thing in a library just as the major number changes. Now you got
Every time the library is built, it regenerates all the MPY files.
generate all the MPYs, right?
Right, like the
Right.
actual version number of the bundle itself is the date.
Right.
And then we're trying to teach people to just match up with the version of CircuitPython they're using.
And we've talked about going to some different bundling schemes where people have a drag and drop choice of what they want. And again, I don't, it seems, you don't need to. I've said enough on it. It just seems to me like we're got an awful lot of unnecessary.
Well, CircuitPython.org does that. You have a drop down.
Right, but there's a 4 and a 5 and a 6, so there's going to be a 6, and they're identical. That's what I guess makes me seems unnecessary to me.
It seems unnecessary because they're identical.
But they're
not always going to be.
We know that.
Yeah.
I'm into it already. I bet people have asked me, do I really need to change library bundles? And my response has to be, I always say, match the version of the library to the version of the bundle. In other words, a certain bundle is matched with a certain
version of CircuitPython.
My point is that that's actually a red herring. It has nothing to do with it. The problems they're trying to fix. So
right. Yeah. I agree with that like having two versions essentially in the file name is confusing. But I think if you think to this world where I think we all agree we want to go of like dynamically generated bundles, like you're gonna have to have a flag of like what version of CircuitPython are you? Right? Like we're not gonna add a flag for what MPY version are you to that generator thing.
That makes it that actually makes sense, and that's fine.
Right. So to me, it's like an implementation detail.
There could be one bundle called 456.
Yeah, and I could look at that.
Well,
I mean, so the version of MPY cross that we actually build against does change, right? Like that's the way it works. Is that we have a name for like 4.x, and then we also give it like a tag, I think. But I'll remove 4x when I add 6, so it's only ever going to be two versions.
That's fine. Thanks.
Yeah. Scott?
Yes.
Why can't you just use an 8 when the solution for that one bundle for multiple versions of Python? Why can't you just alias it when that situation comes up?
I mean, people are still gonna you're gonna alias it, even if the zip file is the same. Like you're gonna just have 3 ways of downloading the same thing. Like that's essentially what we have already.
Basically, that's what we have already. Except you have. Do you have? What I don't understand is. What it seems to me is you're discussing the fact that you have a bundle for 4, a bundle for 5, and a bundle for 6.
Well, no, we have bundles for 4 and 5, and I'm going to remove 4 when we add 6.
Yeah, okay. So 5, you have a bundle for 5 and 6. They happen to be exactly the same.
Right.
So why couldn't you just have one bundle and give it 2 different names And
That's essentially what we have now. That's like, I think what Jerry's saying is that like people are doing extra steps that are unnecessary, thinking that they're going to get something different when they're not. Right? Like, if you gave them literally the same zip file but through 2 download links, like that doesn't help anything. That's just exactly what we have now.
It worries me when somebody's troubleshooting and they say, "Oh, I'll change from the 5x to the 6x version, or 4x to the 5x in the past,"
and it doesn't change.
And if that works, we have a different problem.
Yeah, but in some cases it will work, right? Like in the
but
case of 7.
In other words, if you go from if you change it as you go from 5 to 6, then it might work unintentionally.
Well, again, there's
might not
someone's got some explaining to do with that. If changing from the 5x version to the 6x version makes it work, then there's something else wrong.
They probably got a different version of the bundle then, like a different
right, or a corrupted file or something. But the point is, the wrong problem was fixed.
Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from, Jerry. I just think that it's going to be the easiest to convey to people to tie it to the major version number.
I promise never to bring it up again.
It's fine. Like, it's good to rethink or question these sorts of things.
That's okay. Thanks.
All right, let's keep going. Thanks, Jerry. All right. How's our tanks here? Do we have enough in the tank to talk some event system stuff, Jeff?
Sure. I don't have anything that's running me out the door. So if you have time to kind of background me. So kind of, I see that, for instance, the DMA module can directly create an interrupt when it's done. But there's also the event system, and the event system can create an interrupt. So one question I have is around why would I be choosing to use one interrupt or the other? And then just kind of the other thing that's vexing me is that I'm just not getting the details right around, in the past I finished playing an audio file, and then there was a time when the audio file wasn't playing, and then something about the interrupt is not working, and that's kind of the point at which I'm stuck and spinning a little bit, but I don't have the code in front of me, and I don't know that I can ask the right question about it.
Yeah, so I thought this would be good to talk about now, simply because we have other people listening in and because we're recording it. The first thing I would say is I really think about the event system as just like interrupts, except interrupts are a special case where they go to the CPU, where the event system just allows you to connect basically wires or signals from one peripheral to another peripheral. But essentially they're the same thing of like, I'm a particular like SPI peripheral or a DMA peripheral, and I need to tell somebody else within the chip that like this event happened. And like, I'm picturing in my mind, like literally just a wire, right? Like going from one end to the other end. Although the event system is like a mux between all of those things. So you can connect one thing to many things. And so I think they're pretty similar, but I think the thing that you're alluding to is the idea that the event system itself can generate. So the event system, in terms of like the actual mux matrix peripheral, can also do edge detection and therefore generate interrupts to the CPU. And from what I've seen, you usually don't need to use that because there's also matching interrupts that go, like, again, I think of them as wires from the peripheral to the CPU, like the NVIC, right? The nested vector interrupt controller in the CPU is where that wire goes. But I think what you're hitting is, I think I found a case where there's a DMA signal that is not exposed as an interrupt. It's only exposed as an event. And I wanted to handle that event on the CPU, so I had to kind of go sideways and go through the event system, detect when it happens, and generate an interrupt based on it. Is I think where the confusion is coming from. Does that sound right?
Well, I know that with the state of the code now is that it does look at the event system to see whether it needs to refill the audio buffers, and it doesn't look at the DMA. I don't understand it well enough to know if that was necessary, but if you say it was, then I will put that down on my list of facts.
I mean, so the reason that the way that I remember it working is, so the DAC has an incoming signal to the DAC that can say, okay, put out a new sample. And so for the given sample rate that you want to output, you have to have a timer that's generating an event between the timer and the DAC to say, hey, give me a new sample, right? So for CD audio quality, that's 44.1 thousand times a second. The signal goes from the timer to the DAC, and the DAC can then so the DAC has a buffer, right? So it knows the next value.
Right, of just one sample.
Of just one sample. So when that next value gets sent to the current value based on the timer, then there's a signal out of the DAC that can say, hey, now my next buffer is empty. That signal goes to the DMA, and the DMA copies the next value from memory into that next position.
And that's a case where you definitely don't want to involve the CPU.
Right. That's the thing that's going to make your audio sound bad if you miss it. But then the DMA itself only has so many values that you've queued up. Right. So the way that it's set up is it's a double buffer. So there's 2 arrays of 256 values or something. And the idea being that when you finish a set of 256, you can load a new 256 in its place. And I think that's called, it's either a burst or a block of DMA. But basically you want to know, the DMA is set up to just swap between 2 buffers continuously. And there's a signal from the DMA that says, hey, I'm done with one of these 2 buffers. And that's when you need to interrupt the CPU to update that 256 list that you're no longer using.
Yeah.
Right. And so, go ahead.
Tano, usually all of that signaling that you're talking about, is basically, there are two situations there. You've got one where the sample is finished, and one where the block is finished. Because I always remember the rule, because back in the old days, we used to have the 8080 and the Z80. We used to have a dedicated DMA controller chip, and you'd set that up you tell it how big a block is, and how many blocks are you going to have queued up,
right?
And it should be able to ignore the CPU until both of those blocks are gone, and then you queue up the next. You basically move the DMA pointer, and then it goes on to the next batch.
Right. So the reason that we don't do that is that we would have to have the entire sample in memory in that case.
Ouch. Yeah. Okay.
So we're only double buffering so that when one of those buffers empties, you trigger the CPU, and then you cue the audio stack that Jeff's done a lot of awesome work on, that will decode the next chunk of MP3 or load from the file system the next chunk of the WAV file. That's why you need the CPU involved. But it is really, it is important to think in the same way that you used to have a separate IC for DMA control, that's essentially what we have within the SAMDs. It's just on the same chip now.
Yeah, right. That was the assumption I was making. That was the assumption I was making when I said.
Yeah.
You could do the same thing we used to do,
right.
Only it would all be in one physical chip instead of spread out all over the spread over the peripheral boards.
Yeah. So the challenge that means that we can't just we just don't want to load the whole sample into memory before we get going. We kind of want to do it on demand instead. like minimize the memory overhead.
Yeah, because I mean, you're doing it at 44,100 samples. Sample
Ideally.
Which
Yeah.
not quite, but close enough. But I'm always amazed at how these audio devices do what they do.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I have to say about that one.
Right.
That's just going back to the real old days.
All right, Jeff,
And
what do you think?
Right. So in the main branch of CircuitPython, we are looking at the event system every time we run background tasks and polling that flag to see if there's work to be done.
Mm-hmm.
And so my goal is to essentially remove as much of the polling nature as I can from the background task by having an interrupt occur that actually does interrupt the CPU,
right,
and set a flag.
Mm-hmm.
And so the specific place where I'm stuck is that flag setting can be wrong, and that gets into what is in my particular uncommitted code. If you have any advice on where to look, where is the light good for debugging those kinds of problems?
Can you recap what it was? I think Charles interrupted you, and
I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I apologize.
It's fine. I think I missed the key phrase that you said about what the bug was.
Right. So the code comes up and it will play one MP3 file just fine.
Okay.
And then it goes into a state where the audio object is still around, but there's nothing playing on it. Then when I go to play the next MP3 file, the interrupt never newly occurs. So it's I think it's a problem around the fact that these interrupts are edge triggered.
Okay.
But I'm a little stuck.
In the interrupt handler, are you clearing the interrupt bit?
In the interrupt handler, am I clearing the interrupt bit? No. I wait until I actually enter the background task to do it, which is maybe a poor idea. That's definitely something that I could look at.
I don't think you usually want to do that because you can get if you're actually enabling the NVIC to interrupt the CPU, you can get into an interrupt loop where you never get out of the interrupt.
Yeah.
And usually there's two places that you have to worry about. There's both the NVIC, the CPU side of what interrupts are pending, and then there's the peripheral side of what interrupts am I sending out. And I think the NVIC is cleared by default if it actually calls your handler. But you have to clear the peripheral side still.
So in that case, would that be clearing the event system or the DMA system, or both?
It's the event. I think it's the event system.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
Well, I don't know if it's an exact parallel, but for STM32, there's usually a bit in the control register for a peripheral that basically determines whether the interrupt gets set or not, and you have to clear it manually.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know if that carries over. I think it's pretty similar on IMX as well. So I don't know if that carries over to SAMD.
The what is it? The NVIC I think is kind of common to ARM, but the way the individual peripherals work is not. So some of that's definitely going to transfer over, and some is probably this is just the way it's done on hardware generally. But it's stuff that's newer to me, and I'm not as conversant with it. So.
This is specifically not the NVIC. This is the control register for the timer peripheral across those two steps, which it might be sounds like it's the same.
From what I've seen on the peripheral side, and I know SAMD best, so it's probably there, but there's usually 3 registers for int. There's int flag, which is the one that you can use to read whether the interrupt is active. And then you can write it with a 1 and that will clear it. There's also int enable clear and int enable set, I think, which are the 2 that say, do these interrupts get sent to the NVIC or not?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason that is because, especially on the SAMD21, there may be like 4 interrupts that can trigger in the peripheral, but there's only 1 wire between the NVIC and the peripheral itself, so they get like squished together into one signal, and that's why you have this. Like,
I saw that for event system on the 51. There is an event interrupt for like the first 0 through 3, and then there's like 4 through 31 is all one interrupt.
Right.
And I'm like going, what?
That's also the same with STM.
Because the whole goal is to know quickly exactly which peripheral it is you need to service. And if it's like, oh, it's one of 4 through 31, oh, well, I guess we'll just check all of them.
Right. So that's where you have to go to the interrupter and say, like, okay, which one is it? Because it could be multiple as well.
It could be multiple. And so, I mean, that's not even the level of the problem that I'm working on yet. That's down the road. That's just something that I was seeing from the data sheet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
what else would be fun?
It's fun stuff to work on, I think. And I think it's super powerful because it's really where, like, we get criticism for CircuitPython not being concurrent, but like this is where you can get true concurrency, right? Like moving things off the CPU entirely is like really true concurrency in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely new to think about and kind of hard to understand the machinery that's happening outside of the CPU, but the payoff is really big because it's not on the CPU. Now, there's a whole issue with memory bus contention, which is fascinating as well. Like if USB and DMA need to read from memory at the same time, like how does that work? So yeah, it's fascinating.
I know.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like it's who gets there first situation.
But it's not.
Right?
It's not usually. Usually there's a quality service settings that you can have for memory access.
Oh, okay.
So you can say that like the CPU, like you can say the CPU needs it immediately, the USB needs it at this quality service level and stuff. It's complicated.
Yeah, sounds like it. I mean, I go back to the old day. My mind keeps going back to the old days when it was very simple. The DMA controller was hooked up to a PIC. The PIC and the PIC decided what priority each interrupt had.
Right. Yep. Yeah. Well, that's dynamic. That's dynamic in ARM as well. Interrupt priority. Okay, that's definitely the weeds of the weeds.
Yeah.
All right. If I'm still feeling stuck, can we talk about this later in the week,
Totally.
Scott? Maybe just one-on-one. All right, that would be great.
Yeah, it was actually feeling like more like deep dive stream material. So at some point, I'm gonna have like guests on that to be like, okay, let's get in the weeds for 2 hours and poke at this stuff. So.
All right, I can be third on your list.
One thing that's interesting.
I don't know who the first 2 are. You have to find them.
One thing actually that I think I did experiment with the event system is you can plug like event outputs to GPIO through the event system. So you can actually have like the GPIO set up to change values with events happening. So if you want to be able to like logic analyze when events happen, you can actually like have that tie GPIO outputs to events.
Yeah, I did manage to do that successfully with when I was analyzing playback stuff. So I will try to remember that is a facility that's available.
Yeah, it can be helpful if you're worried about timing, like figuring out like how long it takes you to actually service it and things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was very much the question I was trying to answer at that time.
Awesome. Well, keep it up, Jeff. Thanks for getting in those weeds.
All right. I'll keep learning.
And good luck. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining this CircuitPython Weekly for July, not June, July 6th, 2020. I'm Scott, and I work for Adafruit. If you want to support Adafruit and CircuitPython, please go to adafruit.com and purchase stuff from there. Ideally, stuff that runs CircuitPython, because at least in this meeting, we're all biased towards that. But anything helps. And this meeting is recorded. It'll go up on youtube.com/Adafruit. It'll also be featured in the CircuitPython or Python for Microcontrollers newsletter that goes out Tuesday mornings and orchestrates. So if you want to sign up for that, you can go to adafruitdaily.com and check the Python for Microcontrollers box there. This meeting happens every week at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern on the Adafruit Discord server, which you can join by going to adafru.it/discord. And with that, I think I covered everything. I think next week we're normal time. So join the CircuitPython Nisa's role on Discord by asking one of us to add you. You'll get pinged when we post the notes doc up for next week. And besides that, I hope you all have a good week, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Scott.
Everyone.